Story time about how I ghosted my girlfriend for her sister. Disclaimer is not my story time, send me on Instagram. I, a 24-year-old male, am an asshole. But to be honest, I don't think I can help it. I met my girlfriend in college at a party and we hit it off right away. I asked her to be my girlfriend the very same week I met her. So things moved along really quick. We were dating for 3 months before I met her parents. And I went over to her house and we did the whole thing. But when I met her sister, I fell in love. Her sister was like the male version of me. She likes dirt biking. I like dirt biking. She loves going on solo trips. I do too. We both love skydiving, playing baseball, watching baseball, and my girlfriend, well, she just doesn't have those interests. She's more into getting manicures and pedicures, coloring her hair, making sure she looks skinny in all her pictures, and she always makes me take about 100 pictures before she chooses one to post. So I realized her sister and I were much more compatible. The same day we met, her and I just talked for about 3 hours, while the rest of the family was watching TV. That very same day, she invited me to go on a hike with her and her friends. My girlfriend was actually really happy that her sister and I got along. So I said yes, only to end up making out with her. Part 2 story time about how I ghosted my girlfriend for her sister. Disclaimer, it's not my story time, it's send me on Instagram. When she invited me to go hiking, I instantly had to say yes. But in my defense, I tried to convince my girlfriend to come with us. She said no because she didn't want to get sweaty and she didn't want to ruin her hair. So her sister and I made our way to the hiking place with her 2 friends. During the hike, we had so much fun. Her and I basically walked together for 2 hours and just talked. The longer we walked, the more I fell in love with her. And I could tell that the same was happening to her. We decided to walk ahead of her friends just to get some more privacy. And that's when we started making out. Then she instantly started to cry. She felt really bad for her sister. And I felt bad for her sister. But there was just nothing we could do about it. At least not then. When we got back to her parents' house, we decided not to talk about it or even talk to each other. My girlfriend and I went back to college and I didn't see her sister for another 2 weeks. She finally came over to visit and we decided to go to a house party. And this is when things get even more complicated. At the house party, my girlfriend decided to get really drunk. And she was being a brat. So her sister and I had to take care of her the whole night. When we finally took her back home after she was sick, her sister and I started making out again. Part 3 is up. Story time about how I ghosted my girlfriend for her sister. Disclaimer, is not my story time, send me on Instagram. While my girlfriend was blackout drunk on her bed, her sister and I were making out in the kitchen. I know, I'm an evil man, but I just couldn't help it. That's when I realized that I had fallen in love with my girlfriend's sister over the last 2 weeks. I couldn't believe it myself. That's when I decided to tell her in the kitchen that I couldn't see her sister the same way anymore, and that I kind of wanted to be with her. She told me there was no way that could ever happen and that she would never do that to her sister. Yet she was still making out with her sister's boyfriend. I asked her to tell me how she felt about me, and she basically told me she felt the same way. So over the next few days, I made a decision. I decided to ghost my girlfriend. I didn't have the balls to tell her that I had fallen in love with her sister. I mean, can you blame me? Of course, my girlfriend went nuts trying to contact me, so I ended up blocking her number. She came over to my apartment, but I didn't answer the door. That's when I called her sister up and told her that I was single. But now she's rejecting me and doesn't want to be in a relationship with me. I feel like an asshole because I ghosted my girlfriend and I fell in love with her sister. Now I'm the one ending up alone. Should I get back with my girlfriend or should I try to get with the sister? My boyfriend confessed to me that he's attracted to guys. What should I do? Disclaimer is not my story time, send me on Instagram. My boyfriend and I have been dating for 4 years. 4 years. As you can imagine, his confession was a shock to me. 3 nights ago while we were doing the dirty, he asked me to do some stuff to his bum. And I didn't know what to say. Honestly, I'm not into that, so I said no. After we were done, he asked me why I didn't do it. I told him that it made me feel like it would emasculate him in front of my eyes, and that the thought of him even wanting to do that stuff was a really bad turnoff. Then he said, oh, okay. But the look on his face was weird. I asked him why he wanted that. That's when he said to me that he had been thinking about experimenting. Then he asked me what I thought about it. I told him that I really wasn't into that particular thing, but that we could try other stuff if he wanted to. He then changed the conversation and we didn't touch the topic again. But something made me keep thinking about it. So I took his phone and I started going through his search history. And guess what I found? In his search history, it said, how do I tell my girlfriend I'm attracted to guys? I nearly pooped my pants. I'm not even kidding. I ran to the toilet and pooped. I was sick to my stomach. Part 2 is up. My boyfriend confessed that he's attracted to guys. What should I do? Disclaimer is not my story time, send me on Instagram. After I saw his search history on his phone, I nearly pooped my pants. But luckily I made it to the toilet in time. By the way, he was napping on the couch while I was looking at his phone. So I decided to take it a step further and get on his laptop. I started looking at his search history and that's when I found it. A link to Reddit. And it was a bunch of people talking about how they came out to their girlfriends as bi or gay. This is when I really started flipping out. Thought maybe he was going to try to tell me that he was gay or something. A little backstory on him and I. Like I said in part 1, we've been together for 4 years. This is a really long time. We've talked about marriage and everything. We even went to look at engagement rings at Tiffany's. Families love each other and I hang out with his parents all the time. And I've never ever gotten the sense that he might be attracted to guys. After I found the search history on his laptop, I woke him up from his nap while holding his laptop. Looks at his laptop and then he looks at me. That's when he said, there's something I need to tell you. And that's when he says it. I'm attracted to guys. Part 3 is up. My boyfriend confessed that he's attracted to guys. What should I do? Disclaimer's done by Storytime instead of me on Instagram. After his confession, I threw his laptop at him. Then he starts explaining himself. He said that he's only been attracted to guys for a few months and that he had been meaning to tell me, but he wasn't sure if he really was attracted or not. That's when I asked him if he was gay or just bi. He said that he thought he was bi because he was still attracted to me. Then I asked him if he had cheated on me with another guy. He stayed quiet for about 10 seconds and finally said no. The fact that he didn't reply right away meant to me that he was lying, and I don't know what to believe anymore. But of course, he asked me not to tell anybody. But it gets worse. He asked me if we could do a threesome. I said no right away. Then he told me that I was being closed off, and that if I really loved him, that I need to experiment with him, because otherwise he's gonna go and do it on his own. Honestly, to me, this is just a threat. I don't want to do it with somebody else in the room with us, and I don't want him to be bi. When we first got together, he was completely straight. So now you're telling me I have to worry about guys and girls? He keeps on insisting to do it. What should I do? Storytime about how I flew 8 hours away to meet a famous guy who eventually ghosted me. I might give you a clue about who this person is in part 3. Disclaimer is not my Storytime, it's me on Instagram. Back in 2020, when all our lives were falling apart, I was really bored. So I decided to get on Instagram and DM some of my celebrity crushes and celebrity influencers / YouTubers, Instagrammers, whatever you want to call them. I never ever expected to get a response. But in fact, I got a couple of responses. One of them being my biggest celebrity crushes. Fortunately, all he wanted was to, do the dirty. And he asked me out right away, but I wasn't comfortable, so I said no. Because I said no, he decided to ghost me too. But then a couple of weeks later, I got a response from one of the influencers. And right away, he asked me out too. He said he wanted to go out for lunch or dinner. But here's the thing, I live on the East Coast, he lives on the West Coast. When I told him this, he actually offered to buy me a ticket to fly out the very next day. I made up an excuse as to why I couldn't go. I told him that I had to work. And he told me that he would pay me to go over there so that I wouldn't lose out on my money. I thought about it for 2 days and I eventually said yes. Am I dumb? Absolutely. Part 2 is up. Storytime about how I flew 8 hours to meet a famous guy who eventually ghosted me. I will give you a clue of who it is in part 3. Disclaimers not my Storytime was on me on Instagram. He offered to give me the money that I would have made at work and fly me out there. Thought about it and I said yes. By the way, I'm 24 years old. I didn't even tell my parents that I was gonna do this. Made up this whole story about how I won a giveaway and I was needing to fly out the very next day. But here's the thing. The influencer asked me if I could put the flight on my credit card. That once I arrived to LA, he would give me the cash in person. God, how could I be so stupid? I packed my bags and chose my best outfits. Even went to the salon and got my hair done and refreshed my eyelash extensions. So I spent like $400 that day to get ready to go. I called my job and told them that I was sick and that I wouldn't be able to go to work for a week. And the very next morning I got on the flight, which happened to be delayed. So my whole travel time was about 9 hours. We did exchange numbers, so I texted him when I landed. He messages me back saying, awesome, let me know when you're in the Uber, which he had told me that he was gonna go pick me up. Gave me an address, which I assumed was his house. But when I showed up, it was a party, like an influencer party, and he wasn't there. Part 3 is up. Storytime about how I flew 8 hours to meet a famous guy who ended up ghosting me. I'm giving you guys a clue at the end. Disclaimer is not my Storytime, I said me on Instagram. When I finally got to the address that he had sent me, I realized he wasn't there. It was an influencer party. Like influencers that I knew and I followed on Instagram. So I started going up to people and asking them if they had seen him. Finally, one person told me that they had seen him leave with another girl. Another girl. I was crushed. I went to the bathroom and cried for about 20 minutes. I composed myself and I called him and he didn't answer. I texted him and he didn't answer. Instead, I went to a fancy restaurant in Beverly Hills and I stayed at a nice hotel. I figured I might as well have a good time if I was there. Guess what though? He called me at 3 in the morning when I was asleep. Called him the next morning and he didn't answer. Here's your clue. He has a YouTube channel and used to have long hair. This man proceeded to ghost me for a full week. When I got back home, I sent him a message saying how disappointed I was. That's when he FaceTimes me and asked me to come back to LA. I asked him for the money for the ticket and he said he couldn't give it to me until he saw me in person. What should I do? Storytime about how my friend's husband keeps trying to hook up with me and I kind of want to. Disclaimer is not my Storytime, was sent me on Instagram. After Sally asked me not to come back to her house, her husband found me on Instagram. Let's call him Jerry. Like I said in part 1, Jerry and I hit it off right away. We were like kindred spirits, I swear. We were not just attracted to each other, we made each other laugh. As soon as he followed me on Instagram, I DM'd him. He DM'd me right back. That's when he asked me if I wanted to go get a coffee. And of course I said yes. We ended up getting coffee the very next hour. As soon as we sat down with coffee, he started telling me exactly what he wanted. He told me that his wife is boring, which I totally agree with. Ellie's kind of pretty, but her boring personality just takes all of that right away. So I understand him. I mean, if you guys could see me. Then he told me that he was really attracted to me and that he thought we could have fun. I asked him to be more specific, and he said, let's get a hotel room. I said no. How dare you? I mean, I really did, but I was kind of cute about it. And he's like, come on, I know you want to as well. Told him that I did want to, but that he was a married man. To Sally, who was kind of like my fake friend. Then he asked me to go to his car with him so that we could speak privately. Went into his car, and guess what we did? Part 3 is up. Story time about how my husband's trying to convince me to become an escort. Disclaimer is not my story time, it's sending me on Instagram. My husband and I have been married for almost 6 years. We did get separated for 2 years, so technically we've been together for around 4 years. We had separated during COVID mainly because he doesn't want to have kids, and I desperately want to have children. And yes, when we got married, we did talk about having kids, and he said he wasn't sure. But after we got married, he basically told me that he did not want to have kids, which is obviously something that I did not sign up for when I married him. I began to resent him a lot because I could have been with somebody else, someone who wanted to have kids. But instead, I spent years with him only to find out that he did not want to have kids. I ended up asking him for a break, and that was basically during COVID. So we were basically broken up for all of 2020. This is where I'm assuming he started getting his ideas. We finally got back together in 2021. I had gone on a couple of dates with some really terrible guys, and I basically thought to myself, well, you know, my husband's not like that, so I guess I should get back with him. As soon as we moved in together, he started talking about escorts. He told me one of his friends uses an escort service, and he thought it might be a good idea to start one. Part 2 is up.